Sup, y'all? It's me. It's your boy Asmongold, and today I want to talk to you guys about the Mythic Plus Invitational and what I hope that Blizzard learns from it. Now, as I'm sure a lot of you probably know, the Mythic Plus Invitational has been going on for the past 2 to 3 weeks in terms of the competitive games on the Warcraft page on Twitch. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the viewership, because oh my god, the viewership for the Mythic Plus Invitational has been absolutely fucking ridiculous. We've been seeing 30,000 viewers. People are saying, wow, it's a dead game. Apparently not for Mythic Plus. And I think that it makes perfect sense, by the way, that a lot more people are watching Mythic Plus than PvP, because whenever you compare the Mythic Plus Invitational numbers to the PvP numbers, it's absolutely completely different. The PvP numbers, you're seeing infrequent peaks at 15,000, 20,000. Mythic Plus Invitational, you are seeing a steady number of 25 to 30,000 viewers watching this tournament. So obviously there are much more people engaged. I think there's tons of different reasons of that. PvP is deathmatch style. I don't really think that's as interesting for people than watching the dungeons. Also, I think you'd be pretty hard pressed to find somebody who's playing in Legion that hasn't at least had a bit of a foray into the Mythic Plus system. So whenever they actually watch the Mythic Plus tournament, they can understand what's going on and they can put the dots together. And even though they don't understand all of the little intricacies and the pulls that are being executed on the screen in the tournament, they can still understand what the pulls are, what the mobs do, and they have a better understanding of the dungeons and the tournament in general because they've taken part in things like that themselves. And whenever you compare that over to the PvP side, not a lot of people take part in PvP, not a lot of people take part in arena, and not a lot of people take part in competitive arena. So there are a lot of concentric circles that you have in terms of potential audience. And also, whenever you compare that to the amount of infrastructure that PvP tournaments have had compared to the infrastructure that the Mythic Plus Invitational has had, and also on top of that, the marketing, right? I think the Mythic Plus Invitational has had like 2 tweets about it whenever it was going out. I mean, for me personally, it's like if I open up the launcher right now, like let me see if it's up. Brewfest is now live. Like, what about the Mythic Plus Invitational? What about? I'll open up the launcher. It says Brewfest is now live. It's like they're not even advertising this gigantic tournament that's happening, that's like making history for the game. The first time there's ever been any sort of a Blizzard-sponsored PvE tournament that's making amazing numbers, and we're talking about fucking Rams and Kodos and beer. What the fuck? Oh, sausage chaps now, as of last year, too. It's ridiculous, right? And I think Blizzard really needs to do a better job. So that's the first thing I hope they learn, is that a lot of people are engaged in Mythic Plus. Everybody takes part in Mythic Plus. Not everybody, but almost everybody takes part in Mythic Plus that's playing the game. It's incredibly lucrative, so lots of people do it. It's the same as PvP was back in the day. Not as much now, though. And also, they need to advertise it better. I really hope they advertise it better. And that's going to help not only the tournament in terms of the viewership, but it's also going to help the players. Like, there's no way that you can tell me that Quinn69, that Zachary Gaming, Massive, my fucking boy, like, there's no way you can tell me those guys haven't gotten a huge boost for how well they've done in the Mythic Plus tournaments, okay? And if they win or if they lose, it doesn't matter. It matters because they competed. So if you're not going to do it for any other reason, do it to help those people out and do it to help build the community. So I would love to see more emphasis on community building, more emphasis on figuring out what those players are about, interviews with the players, discussions with strategies at the end of the matches, and also at the same time, I've been seeing a lot of breaks, right, in the Mythic Plus tournaments, and the way that's working. I would love to see those breaks replaced with some sort of analytical desk with other very, very high-end players discussing the strategies that were used, the different class comps that are coming together. As an example, I was watching the match between, I think it was Premonition and Deplete, and they were in Arcway, and basically having a Warlock allows you to mind control some ads in Arcway, and that gives you a unique advantage because mind controlling some of those ads not only gives you extra damage, but it also gives you the access to one of those ads abilities that gives you a buff on one of your party members that you can choose to make that player. I think it gives them basically heroism, so it's like 30% haste, I think, and then it also makes them do 30% more damage. So that's a huge advantage that Warlocks have, and I'd really like to see that stuff more fleshed out in an analyst desk during the breaks in the tournament, and I think that would also make things more interesting and keep viewers engaged engaged during those breaks while different matches are getting set up. And also at the same time, it would help to serve to build the community, helped, like people that maybe they're just trying to get their plus 10 done and they never thought about the idea of mind controlling an ad, but whenever they see that on the tournament, they think, hey, maybe I'll do that myself. So not only does it help the viewers, but it also helps build the community and helps people understand those strategies, and it will help the players that are actually just taking part in the game. So I think there's going to be a huge overall advantage to that. Obviously, I don't think the analyst desk should play a huge part, right? Because the most important part of a tournament is the gameplay. But in the points where they do have breaks, which is quite often, I would love to see the casters turn it over to the analyst desk to break things down on a much more, a much more specific level to help explain it not only for the viewers, but also not only so they can understand what's happening, but so they can maybe apply it themselves whenever they want to go in there and do it themselves. Like what I was saying with like Shroud of Concealment, mind controls, enslaved demons, etc. I would love to see that. And also another thing that's very, very important is the UI of the tournament. I think the UI of the tournament, you guys have to keep this in mind, the UI of the tournament is in the most rudimentary stage it's ever going to be in, right? I mean, this is the first time they've ever done anything like this on this level. So to see that happening, I think that the UI is okay. I'm very glad they added damage meters. I'm very glad they added healing meters. And the next thing that I'd really like to see them do, two things actually. Number one would be POVs of the very, very high damage classes. So like if you're going to do like a huge pull, right? Like give it the POV of like the Arms Warrior or something like that. If you're doing a POV of like a ranged class doing some sort of like very complicated mechanic or, dealing with some boss mechanic, do that. Maybe a POV of like the tank whenever it's very, very high tank damage, etc. I'd love to see that if it wouldn't be too disruptive. And also the next thing is I would really like to see above the nameplate bars, on the actual screen, I'd like to see different cooldowns being used, like so the little squares on a cooldown, same as like we see in the game. If you like apply a debuff to another player, so I'm talking about like like Battle Cry, Celestial Alignment for druids. What are the other ones? Pillar of Frost, the Wings, Avenging Wrath. I think some of these telegraph better than others, but I think also having those little buttons there would help the viewer understand, okay, when's there going to be a lot of damage going out, when is there not going to be as much damage going out, and just helping the viewers understand exactly what's going on. And I don't really think that would be too disruptive, and it would be too much of an over design of what the tournament already is. So I would love to see those nameplate bars added in with a little bit of cooldowns, and maybe also like a Healthstone thing. Another thing that's possible is that whenever they're actually showing the different groups of different players, whenever they're loading in, I would like to see player cards that would show like the character's name, maybe who's playing it, like a Twitter account of that person, just to help those people out. And then also maybe some rows of talents to see exactly what talents this player is using for that specific dungeon. And even though they're going to be changed throughout the dungeon, a list, or not a list, but I guess like a showing of the two legendaries they're starting off the dungeon with. I think if they added all of those, I think it would also really help the viewers and help people understand what's actually going into it, and it would help them look and see, okay, this is why this person's using this is why this person isn't using it, and it would give the viewers, and I think that's a really big thing of why the Mythic Plus Invitational is so successful, is that so many people are already doing Mythic Plus. They understand what's going on. They understand like what the time loss, whatever the Mariner is in Maw Souls. They understand how he works. You have to burn him down before he casts usually the second Lantern of Darkness. So players understanding more of the tournament will, I think, lead to higher viewership, because they can understand it on a much more, competitive level, and it will be more enjoyable for them to see different teams succeed and also to see different teams fail. So I would really like to see better UI features, and that would be number one. And maybe also like a little box next to, because they're using details as the damage meter, they show the character's class, maybe like two little boxes next to the class, like the little sword for like warriors, whatever, two little boxes that show tiny little tooltips for what the legendaries that they're using are, in terms of a dynamic thing that will happen throughout the run. Right, so I'd really, really like to see that, and those are some positive things. But I do want to talk about some clown shit that's happened too. Okay, number one, all right, these are both stupid, right? I think that the production needs to be better. there was like a thing where people were queuing into the tournament servers, and they were reserving people's names. Like, I think that Quinn had like his name reserved by other people, and then the tournament people didn't actually sort everything out until the last 10 minutes. Quinn had a name that violated the TOS, and so they made him change his name right before. And I just feel like I feel like that's kind of a situation where like kind of everybody's at fault. I think like Blizzard should have probably sorted that out way before the match, so people wouldn't have any sort of doubt as to like whether there was a fair tournament that occurred. I think one of the worst things to happen in one of these tournaments is for people to think that it was somehow rigged or somehow unfair. So going along with also probably a little bit better pre-planning and production quality for that in terms of managing the players, I would also like to see, and I think everybody would like to see this, let's be honest, they need to fix the fucking bugs. Like, what kind of a joke is it that in the middle of Maw of Souls, in front of 30,000 people, some tank gets stuck in the fucking cage? That was happening in beta, and they still can't fix this. It's like, if it's that much of a problem and you can't fix it, just have people spawn not in the cage. Yeah, it takes a little bit of immersion away, but so is having to relog your character whenever you get disconnected. Now, and you can also argue, right, that the people that I think that had that happen, they still lost the match, and I think they had a rematch, but you can't say that that isn't tilting, and that doesn't really throw off your competitive focus, and it will really, really upset players, and that mindset that you have in a tournament is extremely important, and anything that subverts that, I think, is something, especially in terms of a bug, is something that should never happen. And this is something that has been an issue not only with Maw of Souls. There have been a number of other dungeons. The first boss in Court of Stars will sometimes just randomly kill you, even though you're obviously not standing inside the ground effects. And there are a couple of other bugs in Court of Stars and other dungeons as well that Blizzard has just decided not to fix. I think that by the time they do the next Mythic Plus tournament, or hopefully by the time they do the finals of this one, they really need to sort that shit out, because it's embarrassing for them, it makes the tournament look bad, it makes people not take it seriously, and also it's frustrating for everybody else in the game that's been having to deal with this shit for an entire year. So I would love to see them fix these bugs. I think Legion has been probably one of the worst expansions in terms of Blizzard having game-breaking bugs in the game ever since the game came out, and nothing has been done, nothing has been said, and it's just extremely frustrating. You've got the Gul'dan, the ledge bug, where if you fall off the ledge, your character is completely bugged out and it'll just like instantly die and stuff. On top of that, you've got the Fell Rush disconnect bug. You had the Warrior class order hall bug, which actually was fixed, so that's an example of the other side. You've got the Maw of Souls bug, you've got the Court of Stars bug, you've got the pre-made group finder bugs where it'll automatically delist. There are plenty of bugs that are in the game that are very disruptive and very just like game breaking in a lot of ways, especially if you're playing in a tournament and you're going for a timer. And it's embarrassing, honestly, that stuff happens in the middle of a tournament, and it should never happen. It shouldn't have even been there in the first place. And the best thing that we can hope for now is that this will put a spotlight on it, and Blizzard will actually take it seriously in the future, because I don't know about you guys, but after you see a bug in a game for a year, it's pretty hard to feel like they actually give a fuck. Anyway, on top of that, battle reses are something that I know that a lot of people have talked about. One of the big differences between, like Mythic Plus and and rating is that Mythic Plus does not throttle battle reses in the same way that rating does. In rating, you immediately get one battle res at the start of the fight, and throughout the fight, more battle reses recharge. But in Mythic Plus, there are no timers on battle reses, and that does make certain tanks and certain classes more appealing because of that utility that they bring. A lot of times there are certain mechanics, especially on very, very high tyrannical levels, that you basically have to suicide for. So if you're talking about like the Amalgam of Corruption, or Amalgam of Souls, I think, on the first boss in Blackrock Hold, a lot of times you'll let all the spirits go through and let everybody use an immunity, and if you have somebody like a warrior, for example, that doesn't have an immunity, whenever he does the big explosion, it will just kill the warrior, and then you res him, and that's actually part of the strategy. So it's not necessarily something as simple as saying that, well, you should never die, because actually dying in some strategies for very high-level Mythic Plus is actually part of the strategy. So I think that making battle reses, or at least, I guess, like, re-envisioning or maybe readjusting or looking at battle reses differently for Mythic Plus could be something that they should do, because it does make Death Knight tanks and Druid tanks superior because they have that. We have been seeing a little bit of Demon Hunter tanks and was it Brewmaster tanks. I haven't really seen much at all Prot Warrior tanks, but I do think battle reses does absolutely make those two tanks much more powerful. And also, of course, you have Druid healers, very, very common. Druid DPS, very common. And just generally classes that have battle reses, because they don't really have the same throttling mechanism that they do in raids, it does make them very, very strong in Mythic Plus. So Blizzard might want to look at that. I'm not really sure which side of the fence to fall off on that for yet, though. The last thing that I want to talk about is something that a lot of people have been mentioning, especially people who are very, very competitive in pushing Mythic Plus. The idea of getting more pieces of loot is cool, right? Whenever you do dungeons above like a 10 or a 15 or whatever, depending on what stage in the patch it is. But ultimately, what I think would be more compelling is some sort of like in-game rewards. People have talked a lot about Mythic Plus seasons, the same as PvP. So people would compete for like completing a plus 20, completing a plus 25, completing a plus 17, plus 18, plus 22, plus 23, whatever. Completing one of those dungeons would give you some sort of a title, and you would only have a limited amount of time to complete those dungeons. I think that could potentially be a positive thing. It could be a negative thing. I think if you make it a leaderboard in the same way that PvP is, where only the top 0.5% of people can actually achieve this, it might not necessarily be the best solution. I would like to see a solution that was similar to the Mists of Pandaria system with bronze, silver, and gold, where people who reached a certain level got the bronze, or, you know, like whatever they want to call the titles or whatever, and maybe have a mount for the people that were able to complete a plus 20 or a plus 25, depending on where it is in the season. And I think that would create another incentive for those very, very high-end players to push towards that next level, and also at the same time maybe inspire some people who aren't really quite there to get there themselves. So I don't really know about a Mythic Plus season idea. I think there are some negatives, but I do think that ultimately the positives probably outweigh the negatives, and it's something that would be interesting and definitely fun for players, and it could keep people engaged in another way. So anyway, guys, overall, I think the Mythic Plus Invitational has been absolutely incredible. I think that, honestly, guys, this is something that we're probably going to see a lot more of. There's no way that Blizzard is looking at this and saying, let's not do this again. Okay, like, they're getting amazing viewership. They're engaging the community in a very, very big way. I think it's just been positive overall, and I'm really, really glad to see that happen, and I hope it continues even more. But anyway, guys, those are my suggestions. That's what I hope that Blizzard does going forward. That's what I hope that they consider going forward, and I'd like to hear yours as well. What do you think about the Mythic Plus Invitational? What are some changes that you'd like to see in Mythic Plus in general to make it more, I guess, like watchable in terms of the tournament, or just different things you'd like to see in game with Mythic Plus to draw in a bigger audience to hopefully boost up the tournament numbers as well. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I've got. So, thank you very much for watching, and like, comment, and subscribe.